Welcome to the new episode of the Marketing Meeting. Today, my guest is Patrick Janelle. He's the founder of Untitled Secret, a New York City based talent management and creative agency. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you are one of my favorite influencers. Well, I mean, if you think
Mm.
about that, I don't have so many influencers. So, besides your agency, we have that piece, which will come towards the end. I would like to also ask you some questions about that. But I
Well,
mean,
I'm happy to have
yeah,
made the list. So thank you. I'm happy to have made your influencer list. I appreciate it. I know we've been communicating for a long time. I know you followed for a long time, and I know your journey from Istanbul. So yeah, I'm pleased to be in your ecosystem.
not that I'm like a really important person or like a really you know but the friends at Nike, when we used to have all these, conversations about influencer marketing and who to work with and so on. And we were, at Nike, we were working with really high names, high profile names. And then I was always objecting to every single person that they were selecting. And they were like telling me, Utter, you don't like anyone at all. I mean, is there anyone that you like? And because there's always like some criticism, oh, they don't do sports, oh, this is not a correct profile for us, and so on. So, I mean, thinking about that, I mean, if you are one of my favorite influencers, then it means a lot. So
It
I'm
means a
really
lot.
happy about that.
I appreciate it.
You started back in the very early days of influencer marketing, and then things folded, and we are now here. You have an agency, and there's like a story there. Could you tell me a bit about yourself and how you founded your agency?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I've been involved in the influencer space really since its inception as we know it within the social media space. I joined Instagram in 2012, right after I moved to New York City. I was working at Bon Appetit magazine, a Condé Nast publication at the time. And I was new to the city. I had just found this new platform, Instagram. It was a creative outlet. It was a way for me to make friends. And I very quickly gained a following because I was just honestly active all the time. But this is before the really anybody had ever monetized the platform. So my goal in creating an audience and a community was more just as a kind of like creative endeavor. It was like a fun thing to do. But shortly thereafter, I would say around 2014 into 2015, I had grown a small audience, and it was the first time that brands started reaching out to me to ask, "Hey, like, we would love for you to feature this outfit or this bag in exchange for some content." And the first few projects I did were just for trade. I was like, "Oh, great! I'm going to get an outfit. Cool." But I very quickly realized that there was a larger opportunity there, and that for the work that I was providing for these brands, that it was appropriate to be paid. So I was really there at the forefront of brands, sort of like dabbling in this space, working. I think some of my early brands were, I remember Capital One Visa card being like a
Mhm.
very early one, but it was a collaboration with Travel and Leisure, and it was really focused on the content that I was already creating, things that I loved about New York City. The campaign was like New York City bucket list. So
Mhm.
all of that to say, like I've really seen this industry grow really from the ground up, from the very beginning, before the term influencer, as we know it, had ever been used. So I've really kind of understood how the value that the influencer and creator economy provide for brands has was established, has continued to grow, and at a certain point, after having done this for myself for a handful of years and working with my own team that I had built up to manage my business, I realized there was an opportunity to provide a management service for other creators in a way that I didn't see elsewhere in the industry. I had had many conversations with kind of like the big agencies like the CAAs, UTAs of the world. There are a lot of other kind of like social media agencies that I had talked to that tend to focus a little bit more on the kind of transactional nature of just doing the deals with the brands. And I felt like there
Mhm.
was this piece missing in the middle that was really focused on brand building for creators, both doing the nitty gritty negotiations, but also thinking in a larger way about the future of the individual brand, and really being partners with the individual creator. to in a very kind of like day to day way to see how that business could grow. So I launched Untitled Secret in 2020, and yeah, and that's the history.
Just at the COVID times then. Wow.
Correct. We launched January 1st, 2020, just before COVID hit. So it was an exciting time and then a very nerve wracking time. I had to deal as a small business owner. I had to deal with the things that a lot of basically all small business owners did.
Mhm.
Getting loans from the government and sort of like those kind of stopgap measures to figure out how we can continue doing business. Deciding if my team. There was one conversation that we had that was basically like, would everybody like to sort of forego for insurance for a little bit or get a pay cut? I mean, what an awful conversation to have. But anyway, we those were the times. Um, but shortly thereafter, we really bounced back quickly because we were in this digital space, and during, especially during the height of COVID, when anything in person and productions were shut down, being able to market, uh, the ability for brands to be able to market to their customers through digital media, through influencers, really skyrocketed, and our business was great. But yeah, definitely a learning curve.
Mhm. But when brands come to you, how is the process looking like? First of all, I mean, like, is there like a specific group of brands that you work with generally, and how things evolve from there?
Yeah, well, let me first say that, just to kind of give a little more information about my agency. So I have two sides to the agency. One is what I call
Mhm.
creative services. And the creative services, specifically, we work with brand clients on their own social media accounts, content creation, influencer campaigns. So that's sort of brand services, as more of a traditional marketing agency, social marketing agency. And then we have another side of the agency, which is managing influencer talent. And that's sort of what I was describing was the sort of like initial impetus for building this agency. So to answer your question, on in one way, we work with brands in a number of different ways because sometimes we're creating content for them, and sometimes we are working with them on behalf of our talent to
Mhm.
to do brand partnerships on our talent social platform. But a larger answer to your question is that it honestly varies so drastically. I think one of the most important things to consider is what is the brand, who is their audience, and what are their goals. And the only way to appropriately have a conversation and a relationship with these brands is really to understand those things. And then from there, we can decide what is the right fit. So, A, are we the right agency? B, if you're looking for influencer talent, do any of our talent sort of like fit the profile of what they're looking for because we're able to help them accomplish their goal. Um, or on the flip side, you know, what is it that you're really looking to do in terms of your social media marketing? Are we the right agency? Does it sort of fit the type of content that we create? And are we able to very clearly understand what your goals are in terms of is it growth? Um, is it monetization?
Mhm.
What are you looking to do? How can we accomplish those goals? And if we feel like we're the right fit, then we can work together. But um, there's no sort of like brand that we will or will not work with necessarily. But it's really making sure
Mhm.
that like we're all aligned so that we can feel like we're going to be the best partner.
Mhm. This is really good because since you've been in that space and you are already in that space in the talent space, you already can really empathize with the talent side and also with the brand side because you see them both. I think in that sense, it's really makes sense that you are having your own talent management agency because you are also a talent on this in the industry as well. So you're involved to you're exposed to a lot of ideas from brands and then you also follow them a lot because you are in the space. What are some of the best practices or best examples that you see in influencer marketing from brands?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for noting my expertise in the space. Our tagline for the agency is "For creatives by creatives," so it's actually really important to me that sort of element of the fact that like, hey, I come from this side of the industry, So I know what it's like to be working as talent. But I also have a background in sort of the agency world, creative direction. So I also understand what it's like from the brand world. So really kind of marrying the art and commerce is where I find a lot of value that we provide. I think that, again, to answer the question, like what are brands doing really well? I think one of the things that is important is really for brands to understand what it means to live in the social media space. Um, when we work with clients, I think one of the most difficult things that we encounter is sort of like the need for kind of like multiple levels of approval, and sort of like getting caught in this sort of like bureaucratic corporate structure, as opposed to, as a team, we understand the sort of like language of social media, and you as a brand have hired us to do the creative work, but getting it sort of watered down through many, many different levels of approval ultimately means that we can't be like fast and nimble in responding to things. That sometimes the creativity that we bring to the table gets shifted away from something that's like really interesting and creative, and will communicate to the audience, and you know ends up being something that is just sort of very kind of like conservative corporate, kind of marketing. So I don't know that there's necessarily like one thing specifically that a brand can do or is doing that I see that kind of makes the most sense. But I think that letting the creativity of your team like really fly is so valuable. I also see this on the, when we're working with brands on the influencer side. So often what I say is that influencers are sort of like the end of the food chain. It's like the brand has this idea, maybe they're working with a marketing agency, there's a campaign that they develop, they have their initiatives, they have it all kind of laid out, and then they're like, okay, what talent do we need to like fulfill this campaign? That definitely works, and it can work, and that is oftentimes the way that we receive information. There's like a creative brief; it's pretty specific, and then our talent delivers. But even within that sort of structure that's set up, if
Mhm,
if you're being too sort of like dogmatic about exactly what you're looking for in terms of the content, and not letting the talent create in the way that they normally do, ultimately you're missing the very kind of like crux of why social media marketing is valuable, because you have these individuals who have a very strong relationship with their audience, who have developed that relationship because they communicate, they create in a certain way. And if they're not allowed to use those same ways of communication, the same creativity, the
mhm,
same style of communication, the verbiage, the same visuals, then ultimately you're not connecting with the audience that you're trying to connect with. So,
mhm,
one, creating enough room within the creative brief to like truly let the influencer communicate in the way that they want to and tell the story in the way that they want to is so important. um, and then, kind of above and beyond that, I think there's really some room for brands to work with creators in a bigger capacity, that they have a seat at the creators have a seat at the table long before the campaign is even established. So more, there's this idea of like, here are our goals. How can you, as a creator, as a creative person, help us reach those goals? And by having that conversation earlier on in the process, I think that there's an opportunity for brands to have reach results that are much more compelling.
mhm. This is an interesting point because generally, how marketing plans are done, as you also explained, are done. There's like a global brief for big brands, let's say. There's like a global brief, there's the concept, or there's like a specific product launch that's coming up. And then the team starts to build the plans around it. And then it's like top to bottom. And then influencer is generally at the, okay, what are the tactics we have? Okay, who's gonna partner up with us on that? But then that doesn't work, as you say. I mean, it might work, but since influencer marketing is just so grown now, and then it's not, it was easy at the very early days for some brands. You just, partner, and then people think that it's quite authentic, and people think that the influencer was already using it. So it's like a user testimonial type of partnership. But now it's
Hmm.
not like that. So um, I think the best approach is generally when the brands comes in, says that, okay, overall for the next 1 year, we have these coming up, and the creator can start collaborating at the very early times rather than stepping into the place at the very last minute. I think this really leads to the partnerships, although it's a very used and cliche word nowadays. you know Make, collaborate, partnership,
Hmm.
and long-term partnership, build authentic relationships, and so
Right.
on. Those are very cliche words, but I mean, building long-term relationships with a creator or an influencer means that you really have to sit down and share your strategy, your plans upfront, so that creator can come up with their own plans. So yeah, I think
Totally.
the real value comes up if you start working with that. For You're just going to say
Yeah, and
something.
I'll say like those are really cliche words, and partially because they're thrown around so much without a lot of true intention behind them. I mean, absolutely, long-term partnerships, authenticity, collaboration. Those are all things that really will work and do work. But I find that so often, to your point, uh, the actual work that goes along with the realizing collaboration and authenticity um, isn't always done. So it's one thing to
Mhm.
say the words, and it's another thing to act accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. So for the brands that are not working with agencies, uh, how can they find the right talents? Because it's not, since you are in this industry, you know a lot of people and you have like a process. But for a brand that doesn't have the capacity to work with an agency, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would. There are two things. One, it does require just being on social media. I think seeing what people are creating, being aware of who's out there, and knowing the way that these creators put the content out there, the type of language that they use, the way that they communicate, how they build relationships with their audience, there's really no replacement for that. However, there are millions of creators out there. So it's not like you as an individual or even as a team are going to be able to, come across all these people. So um, we love to use discovery tools as well. There are a few like Tagger, for
Mhm,
Grin, and they basically have massive databases of talent. And it's a relatively costly sort of subscription, but you really get access to creators of all types, and usually they have quite good filtering tools to help you sort of like really get better information and data about like who these individuals are, their affinities, the type of brands that they might have an affinity with, or they work with, or other types of creators who are sort of similar. We use Tagger a lot currently for this very reason.
mhm,
Um, but I would say that like that's really just a starting place. That's really just a way to sort of like very quickly get large number of names. It still requires, I think it's very important to understand who these people are, spend some time with them on their content,
mhm,
understand, um, like basically what we're talking about is when we were talking about getting the creative brief to a creator and allowing them to do it in their own way, you as a brand need to understand who this person is, so you understand like, is this going to be the right person to open that conversation up to?
yeah.
You Because on the flip side, you don't just want to say to anybody like, hey, how would you do this, if you don't know anything about how they normally create their content. It might not be a good fit, which is why maybe you shouldn't be working with that particular person. So really getting a sense of the landscape of the influencers you might want to work with, but then also spending time with them on their content to see to get a more clear picture of if they would be a good partner.
Mhm. Because it's not only about the follower count anymore, right? I mean, we know that
Correct.
there are so many bots, and then having a person over 1 million means something, of course, of over 1 million follower means something. But there are people that are at the same level that has increased number of engagements. So what are some of the criteria that they should look into when searching from those platforms or being on the social media other than this follower count?
Sure. Again, this comes back to understanding what your goals are first and foremost. I mean, are you looking to reach a very specific niche audience within the gaming community? Are you looking to reach a sort of like broad mass millennial audience? Are you looking to convert? Are you looking to sell a product? Or are you looking to sort of gain brand awareness? And you may be looking for multiple things within one campaign. But it's really important to understand first and foremost what are your goals. Therefore, you can find a person who is, helping you reach those goals. So, some other criteria that you might be looking for is like, who is this audience? Like, where are their locations? What are their general
Mhm.
interests? What types of jobs do they have? And some of these platforms that I just mentioned allow you to get a little bit more demographic info. It's not perfect, but it does at least give you a little bit more insight. You also can talk to you can ask these influencers for their demographic info and kind of get a sense of, who their followers are. Um, I talk a lot also about like what is the quality of the followers. You may have a lot of following, but are these people who are young teenagers, or are these people who are fashion editors at magazines in New York City? And depending on your campaign, you might want one or the other. But it's
Mhm.
really important to understand, are you looking like what is the audience you're looking for, and how does this influencer sort of like represent that particular audience? There's also, you know, the size of following is important, but what is the engagement? How do people respond to certain types of content that influencer posts? If you really are dogmatic about needing to show like the product, and this is like a skincare beauty product or something like that, versus like, say like a tutorial or something like that, understand how this creator does that type of content or might be willing to do that type of content. Um, so yeah, I would say obviously follower count is interesting. Engagement is interesting. What are the types of content? What what does their audience represent? What are the demographics? What's the quality of the audience? There are a lot of different things that I think are really important to consider.
Mhm. Yeah, because other than the KPI, when I'm just thinking about the influencers, because like if someone posts something, like an influencer posts something that they don't really believe in, that it's so interesting. But human beings, I mean, I personally catch it at the first second, right? If
Mm,
something is not authentic going there, although I know that there's like a partnership in place, I understand that that partnership is not like a natural partnership, that that person would not normally use that product and so on. So that's why I think there are really we only thing that there is, it doesn't matter. We just show the product through this influencer and that's it. But it's just within a few seconds, even on social media, we can catch if something is not natural or not. Uh,
right.
Coming
And that's
to
that
the
goes back
yeah.
and that goes back to my point about spending time understanding the content after you maybe identified all these things that we're talking about, but unless you've actually spent time like understanding who this person is and having a discussion with them as well, you probably like that's really the only way to ensure that what you're talking about is successful.
Mhm. So then I found the influencer through the platform. I reached out to them. I went through their feed, and then what's the next step? Like when it comes to the coming up with a proposal and how the projects are budgeted.
Yeah, definitely. The best way, first of all, just in terms of like getting in touch with influencers, I find that the best sort of most professional way is through email. If there's
Mhm.
usually influencers have an email address or there's like a message button on their profile. However, I think it's totally appropriate to sort of just ensure that you make contact so you can, sort of like email, DM, find whatever forms of communication, totally fine. But I think that ultimately, working over email is the most sort of like professional way to,
Mhm.
sort of like negotiate and have these contracts. And if you as a brand, you may think like, oh, I don't know if the influencer is ever going to see it. Well, ultimately, if you're offering a paid partnership, the influencer is going to be interested because, part of the reason that we're in this space, one, is because, obviously we have these creative ideas and we love building this audience, but the only way that we're able to make that sustainable and have a job is by getting paid. So we're always on the lookout for these opportunities. So making it very clear from the beginning, like what the opportunity is this a paid opportunity? Is this a trade? Is this for product only? Like being very upfront about that, I think is really important because from the beginning, you're just able to, kind of cut to the chase and cut any back and forth and get a very clear answer. Um, and honestly, the more details that you can provide about a campaign, if this is the type of campaign where it's sort of like, end of the funnel. We know exactly what we're looking for. We have an idea of the deliverables, and we also have an idea of the budget. I think saying that all right away in the email is super helpful because
Mhm,
you're
mhm,
going to get the attention of somebody when it's like, we know specifically what we're looking to do. If this is an opportunity where it's a little bit more exploratory, I think that's great as well. Like we talked about earlier, getting somebody started in the process sooner is amazing. But I think making it very clear, like, we're looking to develop a paid partnership with you and an ongoing long-term relationship. We'd love to first start by getting to know you and having a conversation, and we can, discuss what the campaign could look like, maybe build the deliverables together and understand what your rates are, based on those deliverables. That's still a very clear, specific kind of request, even if it doesn't have sort of like numbers or deliverables attached yet. But I think the more clear you can be about your intentions and what the opportunity is, the better. And from there, then you have the opportunity to just have the discussion and build the relationship and, also negotiate.
mhm. But, like, the projects, are they generally, for example, in Instagram, are they generally budgeted per, story, per reels, or how does that work in a
Yeah,
very
typically,
general.
I mean, there can be a number of different structures. And, part of the reason I have my management team is we have full time managers who represent our talent who are sort of discussing these things with our partners all the time. So we can structure the actual cost and partnership like financially in a number of different ways. If it's a
Mhm,
long term partnership, it might look different than a sort of like one off post. But really, fundamentally, the way that this business works is a per post or per story or per TikTok video, per YouTube video cost.
mhm,
And that's
mhm,
really the most like easy way to look at it. And that could be, hundreds of dollars for a very, very micro creator. It could be a couple $1,000s. It could be $25,000, $70,000, depending on the type of creator.
mhm,
But
mhm,
that is the easiest way to think about this. Like, here are the deliverables. It's one Instagram feed, one in feed post on Instagram, one TikTok video, a set of stories on Instagram, and here's the amount for each of those. So the total price is X. Then above and beyond that, you know, again, part of the reason that we have a management team is we also talk about, we sort of break down other specifics. Is there exclusivity involved? Is there any sort of like paid usage, whitelisting? What
mhm,
are the other ways in which you're using the talent's likeness? For some bigger campaigns, we've worked with brands who also are doing sort of like, taking that content and posting it in store, the sort of like printed aspect. So there are a lot of different ways that sort of like usage, exclusivity, and other sort of extra aspects to the campaign will include incremental pricing. But at the very fundamental level, you really can look at like, here's the cost of one post.
mhm, mhm. Wow, okay. I will, if you ever, I mean, if I get involved in any influencer marketing project, I'll come to you anyway. That will
Yeah,
be much
definitely.
easier,
Well,
and I will
and
rely on your expertise on that.
sure, and it's one reason why we also have a creative services team because we understand kind of like both sides of the coin, and we also, as an agency, we have relationships with a lot of influencers, so we're able to leverage those relationships and
Mhm, mhm.
understand the sort of like mechanics of a brand partnership, and really provide the best value for our brand clients by knowing how to negotiate well with influencers and have those relationships as well. So yeah, we really sit on both sides of the coin.
Because I mean, oftentimes brands are mistaken with a thought that, okay, we're going to send them the products. And then that's already like, they should be using it. And isn't it okay for them to post it? At least one post. But I mean, like, looking to my influencer friends that I know of, for example, some of them in Turkey, they have like a stock room where
Mhm.
like sometimes it's full of product that they cannot even manage, especially during New Year's time. Every brand is sending a package with a thinking that, okay, we are sending it without any outreach or without building the long-term relationship. We assume that they will be just using it because we are sending the product with no cost at all and so on. Yeah. So
Right. And that is, and that's also one strategy. Like gifting, seeding is certainly a strategy. And I think ultimately the value of that is you do have the opportunity when people do use this product that they're getting sent to have a much more kind of like organic use of the product. Also, you're limiting your costs as a brand because you're not necessarily paying anyone. But the fact that you're not paying anyone for this also means you're very limited in terms of your oversight of what's being posted. To your point, um,
yeah.
I think in general, in general, I think there's like a 20 to 30% rate of sort of like actually showcasing this product at when seeding. So you can expect that probably 75% of the people that you've sent will not feature it in their content. And it's not because they don't like it or because um, there could be a number of different reasons. One, maybe they don't like it. Two,
Mhm.
maybe they have a strict policy of they only show things when they're being paid. A lot of bigger influencers do that. Might also be because they're just getting so much stuff and they don't necessarily have the opportunity to showcase all these things. Um, but this is potentially a good way for a brand just to kind of like get to know someone and make sure that like if you do see somebody using it, maybe that this is a good person to start paying because
Mhm.
they've been showcasing that they really like it already as well. But if you want to ensure that somebody's hitting certain talking points about the product or that you get approvals of the content before it goes live, that what it looks like when it's going to be posted, then you're going to have to pay for that because that's part of the value that you get
Mhm.
in paying for this type of content. So there's definitely pros and cons, and I think that there's still like the idea of seeding and gifting is still a really valuable aspect to kind of like
Mhm.
this whole like influencer culture. But it's really just about knowing what the value is and what you might be getting in return.
Mhm. At the moment, you are actively using Instagram, and well, I'm just moving on to the part where you are my favorite influencer. So you've been using Instagram mainly. Now you have your TikTok account. So are these the two biggest platforms that you are currently using day by day?
Yeah, for me, Instagram and TikTok are definitely the most important platforms at the moment on a day-to-day basis. Still, my kind of like bread and butter is through Instagram. TikTok is a little bit newer for me, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, there are so many platforms out there. You have Pinterest and you have YouTube and YouTube Shorts, um, and I've experimented with a variety of these, but I also have a website and I have a newsletter. Uh, so over the years, I've sort of experimented with how much time I invest in each particular platform. But especially for me personally, because I also have an agency, which means essentially a day job as well. I have limited bandwidth to sort of like invest in all of these platforms. But I also think that it's important for anybody, any creator, to understand like what their value is,
Mhm.
what gets them excited to create, and where they might be finding their potential audiences for the type of content they create. I think we live in a world in which there's just so much content all the time, both that we're
Mhm.
consuming and that these platforms, if you're a creator, are asking you, even if not explicitly, asking you sort of by default to create. That is really important for you to understand like where you want to invest your time and energy. Um, and understanding like what each of the platforms provide. I think one of the reasons I love TikTok is because you don't necessarily have to have an audience in order to reach
Mhm.
an audience, because
Mhm.
of the way that the algorithm works. You create content that resonates with people, and it will be shown whether or not you have a strong following. Also, follower growth could be very quick and very strong on TikTok, which I know that some people who've been on the platform for a year or two now feel like it's really slowing down, but relative to more traditional quote unquote platforms like Instagram, the follower growth potential is huge. And I also find that being able to leverage audiences across platforms is a really strong opportunity, specifically with video based platforms. So I think we saw that a lot in the early days with long form YouTube content. I think we're seeing that also with short form YouTube content now, which is what that platform is prioritizing. We definitely see that with TikTok content. Some of the creators on our roster who have super highly strong engaged audiences
Mhm.
across platforms, but it's specifically on Instagram, are those who have really engaged, who have really kind of like personal video content on other platforms. So if somebody knows your face and is connected with you on video, like TikTok, you really have a strong opportunity to have a more engaged, hyper connected audience on other platforms.
Mhm. Has the engagement levels, as they say, for example, Instagram, do you see any drop lately, or the drop was always there over the years, accumulated over the years? How is this
Yeah, I
going?
mean, I've definitely seen a drop in engagement on Instagram, kind of in general. But I think that's maybe, I mean, it's twofold. One, it's that the app has changed and the algorithm continues to change. Um, but it's also, we now have an app that's about 10 years old. So we're really seeing for the first time what happens to this platform over time. So I think it's just sort of natural um, for that to happen on an app, that sort of attrition. Um, I also think that because the app is prioritizing different types of content, I think that specifically Instagram is prioritizing reels and video. I don't think that's a secret. I think most people know that these days. And I do find that by really using the tools that the platform is encouraging, and that are new to the platform, and therefore they are encouraging, will really help increase that engagement and that audience growth as well. So while I think at large the sort of like engagement has sort of dropped just because it's an older platform and people have been, there's a little bit of fatigue, they've been
Mhm.
on the platform for a little bit longer. I think with the use of some of these other tools, you're able to combat that. And certain people have definitely seen growth. They've seen extreme growth in terms of following and also engagement because they're using these tools. So I think it is possible to combat that.
So let's say I'm in Instagram. What type of content you see right now that's working, and what type of content not working? Like in terms of, is it the duration? Because everyone says that our attention span is really short now. You have to really create short content. However, for example, as a user, I feel that if it's interesting enough, I watch it till the end, even if it's long. What do you see there? I mean, what type of content is working and what's not
Yeah,
working?
I mean, the app is obviously so big that there's going to be a lot of different types of content depending on like kind of like which corner you're in. And I've had friends who've talked about more kind of like ambiance, aesthetic driven content where it's sort of like, like a beautiful, think of like a beautiful terrace in Italy on your summer vacation. There's like coffee set out on the table, and it's literally like like less than 10 seconds, and it's just sort of like a sweeping pan, less than 10 seconds, and because it's beautiful, people will kind of like watch that a few times in a row, which will boost the engagement. There's definitely, I think, room for that type of content. However, I agree with you. I think that if you can really find content that is going to be engaging to your audience and hook them right away, they will stay around and watch something that's longer. I'd say if I had to kind of give a blanket statement, which I kind of hate doing, but if there's sort of one type of content that's working better than anything else, it's like educational, informative, like
Mhm.
connected content with your audience. I think the educational informative is one piece, and I think the other piece is sort of like a human face that's talking to the camera, that's really connecting immediately with the audience. Those are the two types of content, or sometimes it's all of that wrapped up into one, that's really where all of the platforms are headed. I think the platforms themselves have seen that that's the type of content that really does engage people and will create um, the longest amount of view time. It will really kind of like keep people engaged for the longest amount of time, and therefore the platforms now are also prioritizing that kind of content. So it's a little bit of a kind of like feedback loop, but one that I think is like where social content is probably at these days and what's really performing the best.
Mhm, mhm. So, one question to wrap up with.
Hmm.
I know that your content is quite designed. You have niches. So, one of them is design, the other one is travel, the other one is fashion, if I understood
I
you
think,
well enough.
yeah, I think you get it. I think you got it right. I mean, sometimes I wonder too, but I think that's about where I've landed too recently. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have all these newsletters and also the city guides that you follow. So, I mean,
Hmm.
I remember like following your city guides like a Bible when I was going to some of the places.
I love that.
Yeah. And then one question to ask you is what's your favorite coffee place in New York City?
Oh my gosh, that's such a tough one. And it's gone through changes like over time because I've had so many and so many that have come and gone. What is my favorite coffee place in New York? Um I really don't think I can give you like a definitive answer. However, I think anybody who's been following me for 10 years, thank you by the way, if that's even something that you've been doing, would know that I really love the first place that I started going years and years and years ago, which was Gasoline Alley in
Mhm.
NoHo. And I honestly don't, I go there maybe like once every 3, 4, 5 months now. I literally used to go there every day, but every time I go in, like the coffee is good. They don't have like a food program. It's teeny tiny, but there's something about sitting at the window on Lafayette Street on that little bar, and being in that neighborhood. NoHo is just such a perfect like downtown cool, but like slightly quieter than Soho neighborhood. And sitting in the window there, kind of like watching the passersby, that just like always brings me back. And maybe it's just because it's so personal to me, but always brings me back to like I love New York City and I love this place so much. So there are a million. There are like a handful of really great coffee shops in the city, but that remains a very special place to me.
Yeah, yeah. And one close question to that, which will be quite hard to answer. Again,
Uh-huh.
this is like unbiased. I didn't get you prepared for this. But is there a brand that you really like in terms of it can be the brand communication or it can be you love their product? Like is there like a loud brand that you can easily say in like a few seconds?
Let's see. Yeah, putting me on the spot. What do I love? I'm sure I would probably come up with a different answer. I This isn't exactly answering your question, but one thing that I've like really taken to recently on the platform is I've been following people who are doing like who have just like a really creative specific niche as a quote unquote brand. I mean, he's like a small designer, this guy, Danny Kaplan in Brooklyn, who makes these beautiful lamps. I have one of his lamps, one of his bowls. So he is a brand. He's very small, but he's also, sort of like a ceramicist, a creator. Over the last couple of weeks, I've followed like a few florists. I've followed like an account where this girl is like only like things that she collects at like from antique stores. Like I think I'm at a point where I'm honestly not following a lot of brands because like that's not the most interesting thing to me. I'm following, very specific accounts that kind of like, kind of are very narrowly talk about one thing. That's what gets me sort of like excited to be on the platform.
I think like we are now looking for some real expertise or real focused and niche products and brands
Right.
out there nowadays. I mean, like for example, a florist that is only focused on this type of romantic flowers or what
Right.
have you, or like only white flowers. I don't know. I mean, like I'm also finding myself going into the real customize very small brands that I can really find and get associated with. Thanks so
Totally.
much
Yeah.
Oh, and thanks so much for bearing with my, questions at the end, like the last two
No,
questions
I
that
appreciate it.
I
I love
didn't
being
get
put on the
ready.
spot.
Because I mean, you are a person that has been, always associated with so many brands. You have like, many brands and you follow many brands. That's why I just wanted to see what are the top of mind ones that comes to you. Thanks so much being part of the show. And for people that doesn't know you or follow you, I mean, the best place it will be like TikTok and Instagram, which
Correct.
is that a
My
guy named
handle,
Patrick?
yep, my handle is a guy named Patrick, basically anywhere that you find me.
But not on LinkedIn,
Even
right?
even Venmo, that's my name. So if anybody
Oh,
feels like
really?
finding me on Venmo, yeah, no, that's a joke, but I mean it really is true. But nobody needs to find me on Venmo. But yeah, that's my brand, that's my name, that's how people know me, and that's where I continue to put out content, as you said, about my home, style, travel, fashion. That's what you'll see.
So I'll meet you next at the Gasoline Alley in NoHo
Yeah,
then.
let's do that.
Thank you.
I would love that.
Let's do that.
Thanks,
See
dear.
you. So yeah, I'm not leaving right now. Let me see. It's your 99% uploaded. Thanks so much. Sorry, I
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I'm taking antibiotics. I had like some health problems this week.
Oh
So
no.
like my mind was a little bit dizzy and then I was trying to, get the words together and so on. So it was like a little
No,
bit
it was
challenge
great.
for me.
No, no worries at all. No, it's perfect.
Thanks so much. And what I'm planning to do is that I will let you know before I launch. I'll probably, because there's another episode that I need to launch in between.
Hmm.
So probably towards the end of February, but I will share all the content so that you can repurpose on based on however you like if you want.
Hmm.
My main platform is generally LinkedIn because that's
Hmm.
where I generally hang out. But I will also share like different formats so that you can. Well, if you start using Riverside, you'll see also you can take the format in TikTok, in Instagram formats, and so on. It's a very nice platform in that sense.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks so much. And then I really let's meet in real life for coffee one day.
I would love that. Yeah, that would be super fun. It's time. Actually, just reminded me. I was at Gasoline Alley like a week ago, and I was like running around and didn't actually post my little story from there. So I'm gonna do that now. But uh, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it together. I would love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, like, it would be really nice also to talk about some business opportunities too. Because I started, working with brands, more brands in US,
Hmm.
and then I would like to see, okay, if someone comes in, what are the opportunities that we can build around that? So, I mean, I don't partner with so many people. I
Hmm.
just start to partner with people which I really, for example, in this, I didn't say it just to make an advertising of you, right? Okay. Because I mean, like, I really would like to partner with people that are real experts in that space because you're a
Yeah.
creator and you build for creators and your agency
Yeah.
is for creators. So that's a lot of things already. So I think one day over the next few weeks or months, whatever, let's meet somewhere and then
Yeah.
discuss how things are going. And
Yeah,
yeah,
let's definitely do. And I mean, I still feel like I want to hear more about all the work that you're doing, and we can, yeah, I want to hear more about you. So that would be
yeah.
great. Yeah.